So we've learned to think of this graph as a story. It's an incomplete story. It's a story where we need a lot of information about what's happening on the side of decision making from consumers to understand where they are on a curve, shifts of the curve, behavioral patterns, movements along the curve, and so on. But we can still get a lot of information from this curve. We already know that it slopes down. We already know that it can shift in or out depending on what happens with the ceteris paribus conditions. There's one final piece of information that I want you to think about from this curve. The thing I want you to think about in this curve is how steep it is. Now, the steepness of the curve is linked to an idea in economics called elasticity. So I want you to see my hands and see how they pull out when I say elasticity. Elasticity is an idea that's based on this idea of elastic. So when you think of something that's elastic or rubbery, when you pull on it, when you put a little bit of pressure on it, it just expands, right? Have you ever pulled rubber and it's like, oh yeah, it's very elastic. It just pulls right out. It responds a lot. Things which are not very elastic, things which are not very rubbery, you can pull hard on it and it won't really expand very much. It won't really respond very much. So that idea is behind that word elasticity, and that's what's captured in this curve. So in this specific curve, take a look at what's happening here. In this region of the curve, it turns out like when my price drops by $1, my quantity increases. But it increases by 1, right? So when the price drops by 1, the quantity increases. There we are, right? There we go. But when you come to this region of the curve, a $1 price drop, it's generating a huge increase in quantity. Do you see that? Over here, the same $1, huge increase in quantity. What this means is up here, there's not very much responsiveness. Down here, there's a ton of responsiveness. Right? So elasticity is shown by this, is a formula that seeks to show you the responsiveness of quantity to prices, right? And this matters if you're in business because, for example, certain businesses, classic example is drug addiction or medical. It doesn't matter if the price really drops or rises, you still buy the stuff. You're not price responsive. You're not going to be like, oh, it's so expensive, I can't do this. That's the nature of drug needs, addictions, or medical needs or necessities. In milk markets, if you've got children, you can't really cut back if you need it for kids, right? So certain kinds of goods might be very elastic if they've got lots of substitutes. If like suddenly strawberries become expensive, you may, I'll buy grapes, right? You can respond very rapidly to price changes. Or you can decide, I'll buy something else, or you can say, I don't need it. So price responsiveness has impacts because if you're very responsive to price, that has an impact on the supplier side, how they respond to you. But some goods, if you are very inelastic, where price changes, you're still going to buy it, then in those cases, the suppliers have different kind of leeway in terms of how they react to you. So especially in markets, people pay a lot of attention to the responsiveness of the market to prices. And this means that, for example, one reason we like competition or globalization is we often feel that what that means is it allows greater elasticity. If goods from US are very expensive, we'll get it from Canada. Or if I can't get it from Mexico, I'll get it from Guatemala, right? What that means is you're going to move and you're going to be very responsive to price changes. But certain other things, like this has been the debate about COVID and patents. If you need the vaccine, you need the vaccine. And unless, you can't be price responsive and say, I can't take the vaccine. So unless something is changed in how pricing operates in that market, people are going to be forced to buy things, and price responsiveness is not very strong. They're not very elastic in their price responsiveness. So think of inelasticity and elasticity. Elastic, very responsive. Inelastic, not very responsive. Related to need and competitive options, right? We measure this by looking at the percentage change in Q. That delta sign is change in quantity in relation to the percentage change in P. So in order to figure out elasticity, I actually need to know where I'm starting from, and I need to know the level of change I'm making. Because, you know, a change from $5 to $4.90 is not a huge change, but a change from $1 to 90 cents, even though it's the same 10 cents, that's pretty big. Dollar, you know, because as a percentage of prices, that's a huge change. A change from buying 5 units to 6 units, that's not that much, but a change from 1 to 2 units, that's a doubling. So we are going to look at it through percentages, and we're going to think of it in relation to where we began and how much things are changing. So elasticity is a concept we're going to come back to later. There's one final concept that the book talks about. I won't be able to cover it in this class because there's only so much we can cover in a quarter. It's the concept of consumer surplus. But if you take political economy with me or with Professor Danby or anybody else who's doing international political economy, the concept of consumer surplus is something we spend quite a bit of time on in trade theory, where we talk to you about consumer surplus as a way to measure the impact of trade on consumers. But since I can't do all of that in this class, I just wanted to mark it for you to let you know you can come across it in another class. But this is enough to learn about consumer demand for our class and our purposes at this level. Thank you very much.